Okay, students, here we go. We're on to chapter 5. Now, at this point, we're like almost at the midterm mark, so we're halfway through the course. Anyway, I hope you're having as much fun as I am. But let's kind of review as we think about hitting this point of this semester. You know, just like with children, I talk about in this chapter how we mark an individual's progress by certain milestones. I give you grades for your assignment. You set that as a milestone marker. Are you happy with it? Do you want to do better? You know, I think we assess all of the time. And when we're thinking about children, viewing children, providing these opportunities in a preschool environment, we very much recognize the uniqueness of each child. We've already talked about that multicultural perspective. So we want to foster inclusion, but that doesn't mean that every child is going to have the skill or the ability and listen and talk and read and write all at the same time. So not every 6-month-old child is sitting up. Not every 12-year-old or 12-month-old is walking. We can't expect the same thing with literacy either. So I think that as we isolate our thoughts per chapter, we've also got to look at the big picture at the same time. And I kind of feel like I'm rambling a little bit, so I'll get focused again. But let's summarize. Chapter 1 set the tone, kind of the foundation. Literacy is far more than being a reader and a writer. It's the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. What happens naturally, what emerges out of the child, and what do we as adults and teachers help teach? Help them gain skills to become fluid and competent readers and writers. We talked about the multicultural perspective, language immersion, the importance of music. And then this chapter is about speaking and listening. So again, I always give you a bunch of terms at the beginning because I think it's important that you gain confidence in the language of your discipline. So that's important. So in this chapter, listening and speaking, and I'll talk a little bit right at the beginning about how important it is to be able to assess if a child can hear well, because if they can't hear well, that's going to play a role in their ability to speak. So there's a good video on that. The basics of conversation. This book talks about that mother-child conversation. I like to talk about it as parent or adult-child conversation because we have all kinds of families. We have same-sex families. We have grandparents raising kids. We have all kinds of families. So it's not just mother conversation. We have teacher conversations. So what is that dynamics? And how does that foster language development? The teacher working with the child. And then we have the magic of the child conversation. So, if you've ever just witnessed two kids having a conversation, it's loads of fun. My daughter sent me a video the other day of, she has identical twin daughters, and they are spirited little girls, and they were having a conversation at the dinner table about the color of their cup and their plate and their sister's cup and her plate, and it was just back and forth, a very natural conversation until one of them turned and looked at her mother and said, "I need ketchup." So it was just a real fun conversation to witness. The book does a really good job of outlining kind of the natural progression of language production in children. And then there's a whole section in there that talks about strategies. What are some strategies that you as an adult or the teacher might use to, help nudge that conversation and that language development on a little bit? Really good area. And the last part is one of my favorite, because you know that I love books. And so this textbook talks about, storytelling, story time, story listening, but this is how I view it. The story listening, I really want you to think about from the child's perspective. So it could be the circle time, that they're sitting in circle time and teacher is sharing a book, and they're using their listening skills, and they're visualizing the book, and they're engaged in that wonderful experience, story listening. It could also be in the listening center where they have access to books on tape, or it might even be a video too that they're watching, like the YouTube videos that I've shared with you. And so we have those in small group settings, full group settings. And then the other part is storytelling or story time. And that's your role as the teacher. So I'm going to have you do a story time with me. So you're going to have to, this is your assignment, and it's going to take a little practice. And I'll tell you, in all my work as a librarian, teaching this class, working with children, my own children, my grandchildren, storytelling, that too is a skill. The more you read the book, the more you fall in love with the book, the easier it is to read it. So it's so important that you are now gaining those skills. And it takes a lot of reading, it takes a lot of digging through books, and it is awkward at first. But in this chapter, I'm going to talk to you about what are the steps, what are the techniques that a good storyteller uses in that circle time to capture the attention of all those children. So spend some time looking at this in the chapter and in your book. And then here's what your assignments are. So I have two good videos for you. One is about how hearing parents raise a deaf child, and the other video is about a dual language preschool classroom. Pick one of those. Pick one of those and do a nice summary for me and give me your personal reflection on it. Remember, I've already seen all this stuff. So what you're telling me, I'm not going to learn anything from that. It proves that you watched the video, but I want to know how you feel about it. And then the next one, it looks like a tiny assignment, 5 points, but here's the deal. You're going to do a read aloud for me. So here goes. You're going to pick a book from one of the chapters. Now, I don't want a little tiny book. 3 to 5 years old. It's got to have a story in it. It's got to have multicultural perspective. So one of our books, but I'm going to ask you to set up a time with me to do a Zoom, and you are going to read the book to me. And I'm going to give you some points for, was it a good book choice? How was your voice reading this book? How did you handle the book? Remember, picture books. The kids need to see the illustrations as you're reading it. And then did you do what the chapter guides us on? Before reading a book, during reading a book, and after reading a book, what are some good strategies to use during that story hour or that circle time? So this is going to be a fun chapter. I am going to do a video for you, and I'm going to do a read aloud for you, give you an example. And I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect at this, and it's certainly easier to do it with children rather than to a camera. But I'll give it a go because I'm going to ask the same thing of you. And then once we're done with chapter 5, you've got a midterm. 50 questions, 10 questions from each chapter. There may be something about the textbook or the lecture or the video links. So no surprises. Everything's there. You've seen it before, and that will bring us to our halfway mark. So, I hope you're having fun, and I'm gonna start practicing my read aloud because that will be my next video.